Like sands through an hourglass, these are the days of the portal.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. It is Thursday in the world of Nebraska football as the transfer portal turns. No new players as of Wednesday night for Nebraska in the last 24 hours or so to count as additions to this transfer portal class. The latest was former Oregon State linebacker Dexter Foster, who committed Tuesday on the heels of Nebraska's big ad of the quarterback, Anthony Colandrea. So for your portal headlines today, that's it. In addition to the fact that Braylon Prude and Larry Tarver, 2 years in at Nebraska, both of them defensive players, are coming back after they tested the portal waters. So Prude from Texas, Tarver from Florida. They may have decided that Nebraska was a better option than what they were finding on the outside doors of the portal. And Matt Rule, in cases where this is handled in the way that Prude and Tarver did it, will welcome those players back. I imagine that this was discussed in their postseason interviews or postseason conversations with the head coach. And it appears that much like Keona Davis a year ago and Emmett Johnson a year ago, they will be part of the Nebraska football team heading into 2026.
Yeah, check it out. See if you like it. See what's going on in there. And then if you don't like it, come right on back. It's a good thing. Now I don't know exactly what they were looking to get out of the situation, but Nebraska will take some of those depth pieces back and the ability to still develop, I think, those guys as well. So we've achieved our quietest day in the portal, coming off of immediately the loudest day in the portal 24 hours later.
Yeah, I don't know. I took a step back and tried to look at this on Wednesday night as to whether maybe it was a quieter day nationally. I think these things and the way that the portal moves, this is the first year we've had this 2-week portal. That is the only portal period. You remember, just in 2025, there was a spring portal. So there wasn't as much urgency to do it all in the winter. And when it was going on in the winter, it was December. So we're kind of in new territory with the way that the portal ebbs and flows. And we're learning about it. And I think it goes in waves where there's an immediate surge of players who go in right at the beginning. We're right now kind of, I think, in quiet period number 1, which is probably going to end here around the time of this weekend. And then there'll be another surge tomorrow. You might even see another quiet period before then a final surge at the very end, which is a week from Friday, a week from tomorrow, January 16th. And then it could also be that people were just standing on the side of the road gawking at a pileup because of what happened on the national scale on Tuesday night with Damon Williams and Washington and LSU as the what was that us? Were we involved in this? We have something to do with Damon Williams signing what was reported to be a $6 million deal with Washington 4 days before he then declared, hey, I'm going to go leave and go in the portal. So Lane Kiffin perhaps pulling some strings behind the curtain. And we don't know what's going to happen with that. This is an important case for teams nationally to see what happens when a player signs a new deal and there's specific language in the deal to prevent him from doing exactly what Damon Williams, the Washington quarterback, who was what? Did he even make honorable mention All Big Ten? What Damon Williams was is attempting to do now, which is to leave and presumably go play in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah. I mean, he was good either way. He was not first, second, or third team quarterback this year. That belonged to Mendoza, Sain, and Mayava. So let's see. Did he get honorable mention? Yes, of course he did. Him and Coleman from Washington. So yeah, I mean, he's really, really good. But
Talented young player.
Yeah, crazy times out there in the portal. And you're right, everybody's sort of standing by and watching, like, all right, what's going to happen here? And this'll maybe there'll be another thing that happens after that. But other than that, generally a pretty quiet day. I was interested in how Nebraska, sort of quietly, speaking of quiet, over the last couple of days, you and I talked about this on my show today, Mitch, like the linebacker room quietly reshaped, sort of overnight. And we have really yet to see exactly what that picture is going to look, and we won't for a while, what that picture is going to look like on defense, what they're going to ask the linebackers to do, and exactly, in this setup from Rob Aurich, Nebraska's new defensive coordinator. But they went and got a guy from San Diego State, Nolan Chambliss, who's their, first or second biggest addition to date, I think, at this point, just in terms of production. And then Will Hawthorne, the freshman from Iowa State, and then another linebacker late last night in the one that you mentioned before, and his name is spacing on me right now.
Dexter Foster he was a Beaver last year.
Yeah, so
the last 2 years.
Linebacker room quietly, sort of added a little bit of experience there, and add a little bit of depth too. That's to go on top of like Dawson Merritt and Vincent Shavers, who you'll have back.
Yeah, a lot of depth, and I think this might be the position group that was most in need of an upgrade, but it was under the radar in being that. Nebraska's linebackers, and this is in part because of what happened with the defensive line. For your linebackers to make plays, it goes without saying that your defensive line has to be able to move people and has to be able to make a difference in the scheme of the defense. So if you're starting up front and you're being pushed back, then your linebackers have a hard time.
They're just not
finding space.
They're not
they don't have
free enough
space
to make plays. Yeah.
So I think that's some of what happened with the Nebraska linebackers this year. And still, Javen Wright managed to have a very good year. He's a smart player. He was in his 24th year of college football, so he understood how to create space for himself and do all kinds of things. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have that kind of experience at linebacker next year for Nebraska, even with these additions that Nebraska has made. So you got to go out and you got to bulk up. You got to get some players. You have to have some studs there, and you hope that the defensive line is able to upgrade. We'll talk about that later in the show and where Nebraska's at in that bid, but I think they've remade things at the linebacker spot. You have Shavers coming back as a third-year player. You got Merritt coming back as a second-year player. Both of them are proven in this system. Christian Jones has a red shirt under his belt. Dylan Rogers is back as a senior, somebody who got a little bit of playing time this year. There's Pierce Newberry, who redshirted this year. There's Jacob Bauer, who's the elevated walk-on that Nebraska is excited about. Good special teams player. There's a future for him probably on this defense. And then you have Hawthorne with 4 years of eligibility, the Iowa State transfer. Owen Chambliss, the San Diego State player who's proven all Mountain West Conference player, has 2 years of eligibility. And Foster also has 2 years of eligibility after his 2 seasons at Oregon State. And he comes with good size, 6'3", 235. So your typical inside linebacker in Dexter Foster, who was from Portland originally.
Yeah, I wish like I said before, I wish I had a better sense on what they're gonna ask those guys to kind of do in this system. But at the very least, I think you have clearly, you have some different body types in there and some guys who are able to give you different sorts of lengths and speeds and toughness and physicality and all that stuff. And I think that's usually how teams will try and build their linebacker room. So you have some options depending, opponent dependent. So, fascinated to see how they sort of put that picture together, but no doubt it was a position that just quietly needed needed that, needed an upgrade, and we've checked that box, I think, so far.
Does Rob Aurich, do you think that he shifts at all from what he did defensively at Idaho and San Diego State? I mean, that those schools playing out west are more prone to be facing offenses that are pass heavy, and you're not necessarily seeing the level of physicality. Well, you're definitely not seeing the level of physicality that he's going to see as a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten with the offenses that Nebraska goes against any year in the Big Ten. Nebraska's schedule this year required it to defend physical offenses. Iowa's on the schedule every year, but you're bringing on 3 college football playoff teams, 2 that are still playing in the semifinals. On Friday night, by the way, Indiana, Oregon, there is college football to be played this week for a spot in the national championship game, and Nebraska plays both of them next year. So how does Rob Aurich look at what he has to do differently, perhaps, from San Diego State and Idaho now that he's in the Big Ten? And could that 4-2-5 look more like a 4-3 with more size and bulk, especially when you consider the way that they've addressed the linebacker spot here in the portal this week?
Well, maybe I think you're mostly just going off of what you have, and the picture, the personnel that's in the room already. Like I wouldn't want him to adjust, the face of it simply because of, he's trying to, transport it to a different conference and a different setup. Like the tenants are coming, right? The tenants are the physicality and the up in your face, kind of stuff that they've talked about a little bit. They'll be a little bit more forward pressing, I think, on defense, which is a good thing. And that plays anywhere. As far as how they actually align and how they set up, I don't think there's a need to, just say, hey, we play in the Big Ten, so we got to line up with 7 in the box or whatever it is. Like, I don't think, there's a lot of unique and split out formations that they're going to see. I think you have to have the ability to be multiple. I mean, more than anything, you have to have the ability to defend all sorts of different types of personnels and super backs and faster, receiving backs and stuff like that. It's a pretty big menu that you get, when you're looking at offenses in the Big Ten. So no, I don't think you make that declaration or that proclamation and say, look, here's what we have to be just because we're in the fat man's league now. Like, from the outside looking in, maybe, but I don't think so.
Well, at the very minimum, you're going to have to be physical with your safeties, and you're going to have to be willing to bring your safeties down into the box and be able to defend against the run. So, and a lot of times that can, and if you have 3 safeties in a 4-2-5, that can help you accommodate for the lack of another linebacker. And Nebraska's had success historically at times in that kind of a system, but the Big Ten's a different animal, and we'll see. And it'll be interesting to talk to Rob Aurich when that opportunity comes up after the portal is closed. Hopefully soon after next week, we get to hear from Nebraska's defensive coordinator about what he's planning in 2026. All right, we take a break. We come back. We talk about another position that is of utmost importance these 2 weeks in the transfer portal. That is next.
But first, a word from Rocket Money. Managing your finances can be overwhelming. We know from experience, of course, between subscriptions that you may have forgot about, bills that keep on changing or keep on going up, or, coming onto the ledger or going off of it, trying to figure out where all your money went each month. That is what you're trying to do. And Rocket Money is going to help you regain control of all that. The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings, tracking all your subscriptions, and even letting you cancel those unwanted subscriptions right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers, things like that. You could set budgets, goals, get personalized insights, receive real-time alerts for large transaction, upcoming bills, and low balances. That's not it, believe it or not. It can consolidate your checking, savings, loans, and investments all into a single dashboard so you can get a clear view of your whole financial picture. So what's not to love about that? Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One more time, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman back with you here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. All right, I sense that I sense that people, Mitch, are getting a little bit impatient. They wanted defensive linemen and they want them now. And and there's probably a couple other positions out there as well. The good news is you don't have to know what your roster looks like right at the moment, but do you sense the impatience from people at this moment?
Yeah, I think it's justified. I think that was the #1 need for Nebraska going into the portal season this year. Now, quarterback is on a different level. Like, I don't even think you really you consider that in the rankings, the hierarchy of positions of need. When you're in the spot that Nebraska was in this year, that was not a non-negotiable, and the most important piece, most likely, in this transfer portal class was to get a QB, and Nebraska did that. And we'll talk about Anthony Colandrea a little bit more in the third segment of this episode. But D tackle and just D line in general is the spot where Nebraska needed the most upgrade after the 2025 season. You are bringing back a lot of young players who had this season to mature and grow in the program, and it's maybe not as dire as it might appear based on the performances of the Nebraska defense late in the season and the numbers against the rush. When you look at players like Williams Winery and Riley Van Poppel, and you add in the fact that Nebraska redshirted Tyson Terry and redshirted Malcolm Simpson, there are other players, Sua Lefotu. Nebraska has bodies. It isn't like the cupboard is bare at defensive tackle, but similar to what I think you see that Nebraska has done at linebacker this year, where it's not going to put Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt into spots next season that require them in their first year of major contributions to play 60 snaps a game. That's why they went and got Owen Chambliss and Dexter Foster, much like what Nebraska did at receiver in 2025, so that Quinn Clark and Keelan Smith and Ja'Cory Barney even didn't have to play the entire game. Nebraska went and got Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter. That needs to happen at defensive tackle, on the defensive line. It's more important even at that position because physicality and size and experience is the whole game. So to date, Nebraska hasn't done anything, hasn't scored anybody in the portal at that defensive line spot, and it doesn't have a defensive line coach, at least publicly, that we're aware of, who can talk to prospects in the portal. All of this, yes, leads to some impatience and anxiety on the part of the Nebraska fan base, and I would think inside the Nebraska football building as well.
Yeah, I probably a little bit. I'm sure they can feel it. At the same time, like, there's no penalty points if you don't have any defensive linemen on January 7th, but you do on January 17th. You know what I mean?
That's fine.
So we could probably wait to give it the full evaluation and go into full panic mode before the end of next week.
We're not moving the DEFCON meter over this.
Right. But with that being said, like you just said, it's probably increasingly difficult to do some of the things that they're trying to do, considering they don't have a face of that position. They don't have a coach of that position at the moment. And so that begs the question, like, number one, can they accomplish what they want to accomplish in the portal if that person doesn't have a name? And, number two, are there any leads on that right now? Like, are we any closer to that than we were 5 days ago?
NFL, I mean, that's the that's the best I can give you, is to say that Nebraska's after somebody that's finishing up their season in the NFL, whether in the playoff or in the scramble after Black Monday in the league. There's a lot of uncertainty about who's going to be coaching where in the NFL next season, and there are 14 teams still playing as of this weekend and next weekend. So lots of D-line coaches out there who could be on Matt Rule's radar. We know one with the Houston Texans, Frank Okam, and they're in a wild card game this weekend, has experience with Rule at Baylor and with the Carolina Panthers as a defensive line coach. I think people just by default assumed that it was Frank Okam that Nebraska was going after because there hadn't been an announcement made as we got into January, but it's not like there's a bunch of smoke there. It's not like
I don't know what would prevent them from announcing that.
Right. Exactly. And you're not hearing from now, the portal prospects don't do a lot of interviews. When this kind of stuff happens around the recruiting season, you'll oftentimes hear recruits who do interviews after they come on visits or have phone calls with coaches that speak to the media and say things like, yeah, they had me give this guy a call and he's going to be Nebraska's next defensive line coach. That very well might be going on with the portal prospects, but it's rare for players in the portal or even those who have signed with programs to do much at all media. And that's just a reflection of the fact that they're older, they're more businesslike, and this kind of stuff happens a lot faster. They're not like starstruck by getting a call from Mitch Sherman or whoever it might be. I see Will Hawthorne, Nebraska's linebacker addition from Iowa State, did an interview with Justin Fromer from the Hastings Tribune, and he's just but Hawthorne's just a year out of high school, and he redshirted at Iowa State. So he's more like a high school recruit than he is like a typical transfer portal player. So the quietness about the D-line spot may in part be a result of that, and it just could be that Matt Rule's got this all buttoned up, and the time just isn't right to announce it. So I don't know, but like I said earlier this week, if we get to Friday and Nebraska doesn't have a quarterback, then I'm moving us to DEFCON 2. If we get through the weekend, if we get to like Monday or Tuesday of next week, and like we're counting the days on one hand that the portal's still open, and Nebraska hasn't made a real move either with the D-line coach and or with adding defensive tackles, then I think that's also cause for real concern. Maybe now it's just like faux concern, but it could be real concern in a short time.
Notable in this category, Nebraska did offer an Iowa Western defensive lineman today. I apologize to the Reaver fans who may hear this. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name, but Andy Berberja.
I think that's right.
He was part of he was part of a defensive line for Iowa Western this year that had I believe 120 sacks, which is a lot, the most out of any.
They have 10 sacks a game. What are you talking about? Like
dead serious. Yes, at the most out of any college football team at any level this year, Iowa Western, and they won the national championship.
Who coaches their D line?
There's a guy named Aaron. I believe his name is Aaron Terry. He's got local ties. Interesting guy.
He's the uncle of Tyson Terry. Yes, the uncle of Nebraska defensive lineman Tyson Terry. So I maybe somebody ought to look at him. But Berberja had 11 sacks for the Reavers, so he probably ranked like 8th on the team in sacks. But he was a JUCO All-American, and Nebraska's offered him. And it's notable that Nebraska has offered an Iowa Western player, because Iowa Western's been in Council Bluffs for many years, winning JUCO national championships and competing for JUCO national championships. This was another win this year, and it has been rare, the instance that Nebraska football has paid attention to what's going on over there with Scott Strohmeyer's program. So maybe this is the door finally opening to Council Bluffs from Lincoln.
It's possible. They've turned out some dudes who have gone on to other colleges and had success and gone on to
the NFL.
Yeah, it's amazing. So fingers crossed, I guess. I mean, I hope for everybody around here that something comes of that. So something to note on the defensive line front. When we come back, we will have a few more stray thoughts on Nebraska's new quarterback, Tony Colandrea, next.
All right, segment 3 of the Locked On Nebraska podcast here. Talking about Tony Colandrea. He's a gunslinger. I don't even think I was doing an Italian dialect.
You had the cadence
there.
right, I think. You had the cadence right.
I think I was talking like, I don't know, some guy from a deli in New York, who may or may not have been Italian. But before we get to Tony, let's assess for Nebraska after defensive line, where should the most focus be on remaining players in the portal? The Huskers have 2 offensive linemen, 3 linebackers, a quarterback, and what am I missing here? What am I missing? A safety in Dwayne McDougal from San Diego State.
Yeah, I'd probably just say another offensive lineman. Or 2. I'll be curious to see what they do with Bob Belade. Like, is he a day one tackle, or is he just like a swing guy who could play guard and tackle? You have a couple guys on your roster who have a little experience doing that, so it'll be interesting to see where each of those guys sort of settle in. But probably another offensive lineman, like a nondescript offensive lineman, and then I think they need a running back. Yes, that's a position I famously get very antsy about. So take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But I think they need a proven running back.
I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if because Nebraska hasn't been aggressive, it seems, in pursuing running backs to come on visits. Do you know? I should know this. And it could be looked up very easily. I was searching in the wrong place on Wednesday night. Charmar Brown, the running back for Miami, who scored the game-clinching touchdown against Ohio State in the CFP quarterfinal, but hadn't played a big role in the playoff before that. Is he expected to go in the portal? Is he in the portal? I don't believe he's in the portal, but I have seen speculation that he's going to go in the portal because Miami is bringing back its top back next season, and you would think that these Miami players are going to be late to go in the portal because they have a game on Thursday night. Tonight they have a game, so maybe there'll be a rush of Miami players that go into the portal. But there seems to be on the internet a belief that Marty Brown is going back in the portal a year after transferring to Miami from North Dakota State.
Yeah, I he's not currently in, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised given how you just explained it there. And then yes, Nebraska would be an obvious tie if he were to do that. So it's possible that they're just, they're settled on that already behind the scenes and they'll go from there. But gosh, I mean, whatever. If that's how it works out, then I think that's probably okay. That's probably fine. But I think there's no doubt that Nebraska needs to add another guy to that room who's got some carries underneath his belt at the college level.
I don't know if maybe there's an expectation on Nebraska's part that the Omaha Creighton prep grad Brown will go in the portal after the playoff and after Miami's run, and the Huskers could go to the top of his list. Possibly, if not, then get busy and go find somebody because it's a position of need. Another quarterback, I think you could see perhaps somebody with a connection locally, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular, so don't tweet me on that one, but just there's players. I'm not talking about Danny Kalen. I'm not talking about Zane Flores, but maybe something with a name that people may have heard of who could end up back around Nebraska as a depth piece at quarterback. They need a long snapper. You mentioned offensive lineman, defensive lineman. Like it's the glaring thing in the portal. The big missing piece, and they need multiple defensive linemen. A note that was just shot to me. This came from well, it didn't come from Eli Letterman, but it's a tweet from Eli Letterman about Andy Berberja, the Iowa Western defensive tackle who earned an offer Wednesday night from Nebraska. His list of Power 4 offers before this week included Auburn, Missouri, Penn State, Texas Tech. He's represented. Oh, this is interesting. No, it's not. It's not the same representation. It looks similar to the same representation from Anthony Colandrea, but it's not. So anyway, Berberja it's not a reach at all for Nebraska to go into Council Bluffs and offer this player. He's got SEC offers and Big Ten offers already. And
we talked to Iowa Western coach Scott Strohmeyer, quite often on our show, and he seemed to think that JUCO recruiting was kind of coming back around a little bit. It's still difficult because they're in such a tough spot just as far as where the calendar sits. But and obviously as of a couple of years ago, they were just getting swallowed up by the portal and all that stuff. And now I think they have they've ended up in an interesting spot where a lot of these teams are getting beat out for guys or don't feel like they can compete from from the money side of things. And so like it's production, it's collegiate production that you could just, plug in and potentially get on the field right away for a small dollar amount. And so I think that's where the JUCOs come in.
So let's circle back on the QB. Any day 2 thoughts or day 3 thoughts about Anthony Colandrea now that we've learned more about him? One thing, and I'll start the conversation that I've heard in hearing from a coworker of mine who got the chance to watch him play a lot this year and has watched film of really all the quarterbacks around the country, is that the comment was that he's going to be a boatload of fun in that offense. So is Matt Rule going to allow Anthony Colandrea to be a boatload of fun in Nebraska's offense?
That's it. That's the thing that I've been ruminating on, and that's the thing that we will likely be talking about for the next 9 months. But in my opinion, that is immediately where my head went to. You have this very interesting, these ingredients where Colandrea is a playmaker. He's a risk taker. He is, just the kind of guy who wants to push, but can make mistakes. Matt Rule is a defensive minded head coach who has routinely told his quarterbacks to not make mistakes, and his quarterbacks have been risk averse over time because of that. Dana Holgorsen is sort of adaptable and can kind of make something out of whatever you give him, but it's just like, is it more on the scale, on Rule's scale? Because we know Rule's preferred scale. It's slower, calmer, in control. Yeah, let's do that. And that is not what our dear friend Tony brings to the table. It's gonna be fireworks. It's gonna be loud. It's gonna be exciting. Doesn't mean it's all gonna be good. He'll put the ball in harm's way plenty. But I do think you have to let that kind of player be him. So I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. It's a fascinating cocktail.
He's known to leap over defensive players.
Yeah, he's crazy.
Yeah, he's going to drive Nebraska fans crazy at times, and he's gonna have them, cheering at their absolute peak for a play that he makes, and the task for Dana Holgorsen and for Glenn Thomas and the Nebraska offense is to minimize those kind of plays that make you want to pull your hair out and to maximize the stuff that that's the reason that he's in this spot. And he's a smaller guy. And we'll probably do podcast episodes or segments of episodes here over the months ahead about whether he's a Big Ten quarterback, whether he's cut out to be a Big Ten quarterback at 6 foot and 205 pounds. And I think that's I don't think that should be a limitation. You do see a lot of big, large quarterbacks in the Big Ten, in the SEC, but then there are players who are just talented enough and instinctive enough to be able to avoid injury and just have a knack for being able to make plays, and it doesn't matter. I mean, they can do it in the NFL, and certainly if you can see guys that size in the NFL, you can do it in the Big Ten.
I think he seemed, I haven't like watched all of his games, but he seems like he's slick enough to not be taking, direct hits all the time. So that's definitely what you would be worried about with a quarterback of his stature. It's not like he's running between the tackles. He ran for 600 yards last year, but like when you watch him, it is all on like, not all, but a lot of it is scrambling and making plays after stuff is broken down. So usually that's outside the pocket and not with all the big guys in there. So, he took a bunch of sacks. He'll make some, boneheaded plays, but I do think this is a good, this is a good player for Nebraska to have. And it's at the very least an exciting one.
Okay, let's wrap this thing up. Don't forget tonight, Thursday night, 6:30, ESPN, Miami and Ole Miss in one college football playoff semifinal from Glendale, Arizona. And then Friday night, Oregon and Indiana, also 6:30 on ESPN, the second college football playoff semifinal from Atlanta. And we're going to have a mailbag show on Friday. So send us your questions. Get those in at lockedonneb@gmail.com. We'll be back on Friday with that. For those of you on video today, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, be sure to make your second listen, the Locked On College Football Podcast. Thank you for joining us today.